All right, everyone's rolling in, Mike.
Everybody's on. We're ready to go.
I'd give it about 20 seconds and then you're good to go.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining in on this webinar. I'm Mike Thompson, and the purpose of today's webinar is to discuss the program, the Emergency Relief Program, which came about after the passage and signing into law of my bill, the WIP Plus legislation. And we have representatives from the department, U.S. Department of Agriculture, on the web, and they're going to make a brief presentation, and then we're going to roll it into questions. I just advise you now, if you have a question, if you go to the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen and type that question in, we have a moderator who will monitor those and will ask the questions. If you see somebody else's question that you like that question, and that way it will give us an idea as to prioritizing the questions that are asked. So I want to give as much time for questions as possible. It's been tremendous response. We've got a ton of people who are on. I think is illustrative of the need for this program. So thank you all again. Thanks to USDA for joining us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve Peterson, who's the administrator of the Farm Services Program, and he and Scott Merlot are going to give us a few opening remarks, and we'll go right to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. And I am going to turn it over to Scott Merlot so he can discuss some of the collaboration, because we do also have the Risk Management Agency on. And so I do want to give you the opportunity, Scott, to kind of pull that piece in, and then I can go over some of the highlights of the program and kind of fill in for some of the details. So Scott, I'll turn it to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thanks very much. I'm Scott Marlowe. I'm the Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs here at the Farm Service Agency. We've got a series of folks from USDA here on the line. I especially want to shout out to Richard Flournoy and Chris Alber, our partners who are here, and Jeff Yasui, our partners who are here from the Risk Management Agency. This program represents a historic partnership between Farm Service Agency and Risk Management Agency. We were given two strong imperatives in developing this program. One was to leverage the existing data that farmers had already, existing data and existing applications that farmers had already put in. And the other is to move it as quickly as we possibly could. This program is based on, it uses a farmer's participation in crop insurance or the non-insured crop disaster assistance program, NAP, as the basis for their essentially application process in the first phase of the emergency relief program. So we're very grateful to our friends from RMA for their partnership. They did a great job. We've had through this, where the money is already getting out into farmers' pockets. And with pretty minimal, we always are very appreciative of the work of our folks in the county offices. On all of the meetings that I do, I encourage everybody who comes into one of these meetings to go in and give the folks in your county office our thanks. But part of the design of this program was to minimize the work on their side as well. So, and this is phase one of a two-phase process. It's actually, there are four parts. We had the Emergency Livestock Relief Program, which dropped a month or so ago and has gotten about $590 million into the pockets of farmers without them having to do any kind of application process. That was phase one on that. This is phase one on the Emergency Relief Program. There will be a phase two, which will capture those For phase one of ELRP, that was based on participation in the livestock forage program. For phase one of, as I said, phase one of ERP, that's based on participation in crop insurance and NAP. Phase two will pick up folks who did not participate in either of those programs, in those programs. And so we're working on the phase two even as we speak. No, we can't tell you exactly when it will be out, but we're spending lots of time working on it and going as quickly as we can, just to head off at least one of the questions that I know is going. So, Steve, if you want to, I'll hand it off to you. You can walk through some of the details on the program, and we've got folks who are here, and we'll all be happy to answer questions as we go.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it. And it's a great opportunity to really work with you all and be able to have this webinar and share the information that we have. As Scott indicated, we're very excited. As of last week, those producers, those insureds that had insurance and received a claim, so they've received an indemnity as a result of their insurance, should have received by now, or very close by now, a letter. It's a letter from both Administrator Ducheneau and Administrator Bunger from RMA, along with a pre-filled application. And as Scott indicated, what we're doing is we're leveraging the information that was already filed on the crop insurance side, and we're building off of that. The legislation allows us to basically increase the guarantee under the program. So it's basically a bump in the guarantee or the coverage level that a producer elected. It builds upon the coverage level that a producer elected and recalculates the guarantee, and then ultimately determines what that loss was, recalculates the loss, takes into consideration the indemnity that a producer received. In addition to, and this is one of the statutory requirements, it takes into consideration the premiums and fees, and those are deducted so that actually a producer will receive a higher payment. So the higher the premium, even though the indemnity may have been small, we're taking that into consideration in the calculation of the ERP benefit. And so the ERP could be showing a significant dollar amount as a result of taking that premium and fees into consideration. A couple things that I do want to point out, because it is a change and a difference between past disaster programs. Under past disaster programs, if people on the call remember going into our local FSA offices, they had to sit down. It took hours to really glean through the information from RMA. Basically, it required our county office staff to understand some of the policies and the nuances that are offered by crop insurance to be able to do that. Under this process, as Scott indicated, it's a very simplified process because we work with RMA very closely. They're the ones that actually recalculated that guarantee and calculated the benefit for FSA. Now, FSA is responsible for receiving those applications, those pre-filled applications in our local offices. And then we're responsible for implementing the program as in issuing the payment and then applying some of the eligibility criteria. And some of you are probably very much familiar with this. Some of those eligibility criteria are payment limits. There is a payment limitation that was authorized under the statutory language that basically starts out using our past WIP provisions for payment limitations. So all producers have a $125,000 payment limitation up front that's applied. However, if a producer can show that over 75% of their income is due to farming, then ultimately that payment limitation is increased from 125 to 250, so $250,000 per person. And the nuance under this provision that we've not had in the past is it really recognizes non-specialty crops unique from specialty crops and high value crops. So specialty crops and high value crops actually have a separate payment limitation of $900,000 as long as they're able to show that over 75% of their income is due to farming. So everyone's eligible for the program. AGI does not apply other than to do that test of 75% to qualify for the higher limitations that are associated to the program. So just in summary, producers are receiving those letters and pre-filled applications. There are three things that they need to certify in receipt of that application. Number one, whether or not the cause of loss was due to an eligible cause as outlined in the statute. And there's very specific causes of loss that are listed that are eligible. One of the things that we are doing around cause of loss, as long as there was a claim filed, regardless of the loss, FSA is getting, or those producers are receiving that pre-filled application. So we're not making any eligibility determinations up front, other than the fact that the disaster event had to occur between January 1 of 2020 through December 31 of 2020 for 2020 losses. And for 2021, an event had to occur January 1 of 2021 through December 31 of 2021. So those are the parameters that were really put in place with regard to those claims that were sent over to FSA, that were put in the pre-filled applications, that were included for producers and sent out to producers. Those were the only determinations. If the earlier cause of loss was for hail, and then later there was a fire, wildfire, or drought, but a subsequent loss was not filed for those conditions, that is not going to matter, because we're still getting all those claims over to FSA, and we're requiring the producer, like I said, to certify that the cause of loss, some of that loss to that impacted crop, was due to an eligible cause as listed in the statutory language. The other thing that a producer is certifying to is shares. We recognize that some producers have unique relationships with an insured policyholder. You could have those that have a substantial beneficial interest. So they have a share of the crop, but the way they can insure the policy is just under one name. This allows, under the pre-filled application, the policyholder who's going to receive the pre-filled application, the ability to break out other persons that may have an interest in the crop and show that share associated to that loss. And the last thing that a producer has to certify on the pre-filled application before submitting it back to the county office is the fact that they have to meet linkage, or are willing to meet linkage for 2 subsequent years at the 6,100 coverage level to maintain their eligibility for the emergency relief program. So as Scott already indicated, there is a phase 1. Right now we're in the middle of phase 1. Letters are out the door. There will be a subsequent non-insured assistance program piece that will come out a little bit later. And then to do the catch-all, to fill all the gaps of those that may not have obtained coverage under crop insurance, not obtained coverage under the non-insured crop disaster assistance program, or suffered quality losses that weren't fully covered under the crop insurance policy, or other situations that may have occurred. We're going to cover those under a phase 2 scenario, and that is yet to come. What we're focusing on right now, as Scott said, is to get money out quickly based on data that producers have already filed information on, and trying to make this a very quick and seamless process. So with that, that provides a very high level overview of the program. Again, I do, as the Congressman indicated, we do want to make sure that we have plenty of time to answer some of those questions. Like Scott indicated, we've got a lot of good representatives from RMA also on the call, along with other USDA representatives from the Farm Service Agency to help answer those questions. So with that, we can turn it back over and we can start the Q&A session.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask Katie to moderate this. I see there are a number of questions that have already come in. But again, if you have a question, go to the Q&A function, type in your question. If you like somebody else's question, like it, and we'll know how to prioritize them. Thank you all. Thanks for the presentation. And Katie, it's up to you.
Awesome, great. So first question, this person says, on the USDA form that we got in the mail, what does the number 13 share mean? What figure do I put in that box?
That's a great question, Katie. Again, as I indicated, that's one of the things that we're asking. If the insured policyholder that received the pre-filled application doesn't have anybody else interested or has an interest in the commodity, they don't have to put an entry into item 13. If there is a substantial beneficial person listed on the pre-filled application that shows that they had a beneficial interest in the commodity, then you would enter in the individual share interest in the crop before you finalize the pre-filled application and send it back to the FSA office. The one thing I want to clarify again is that if there isn't someone that doesn't have a substantial beneficial interest, then that's not something that's necessarily required to be entered. We've already, through the insurance product, already captured the share that's necessary associated to the application.
All right. Next question. This person says, if I have not received my USDA form, or in the next couple of days, as you indicated, it might still be in the mail, who or where should I request a duplicate form from?
So I would ask two things. Number one, only those insured producers right now, insured policyholders that received a claim, meaning they filed a claim for a loss and received an indemnity, will receive these pre-filled applications. So that's clarity number one. If you did not receive an indemnity through crop insurance, then you will not receive the pre-filled form. You will be picked up for that shallow loss, et cetera, under phase 2. However, if you did receive an indemnity and haven't received it yet, you can contact our local county service center, FSA service center, and they have received the same list of those applicants in their office that will be receiving these applications, and they can verify for you whether or not you will be receiving a pre-filled application at that time.
Also note that for the non-insured crop disaster assistance program for NAV, those letters have not gone out yet. They'll go out soon, but they've not gone out yet. We're
Very good
waiting.
point, Scott.
Some of the reporting is still taking place, so that if a person has coverage under NAP, they will get a letter. They just haven't gone out yet.
All right. Next question. In calculating the 75% of income from farming, will USDA look at just wine grapes? We grow a lot of wine grapes here. Or will the calculation include wine grapes and value-added products like wine?
Basically, it's all agricultural products. So, and really it's a certification. When you get the pre-filled application, if you believe that over 75% of your income is from farming, there's a form, a supplemental form that you would file. It's an FSA 510. You take that FSA 510 to your certified public accountant, and they will certify to the fact that over 75% of your income is from farming. I mean, that's a broad definition. And then you would submit that form back to FSA, and then we would enter it, which would allow you to be eligible for that higher payment limitation of $900,000.
All right. Next question. What if you had a new vineyard block that was covered by crop insurance, but you didn't receive an indemnity because there was not enough tonnage history for the block for only 1 year? Would this block be eligible under phase 2?
Katie, that's absolutely correct. Yes, it will be eligible under phase 2. Yep.
Perfect. And related, there's a question. It says, I lost crop in 2021 due to the drought. However, since I had only purchased 65% coverage and my crop loss was about 40%, I did not file a claim with my insurance company. Can I file for this as well? Would that be a phase 2 person, or is there a way to get them into phase 1?
So they're saying they did not file a claim originally with regard to the insurance policy. I'm going to ask the question because I don't know based on the percentages that were provided. If they had did they have a 40% loss or a 45% loss?
A 40% loss, a 65% coverage.
So basically they had a 5% loss and they would have qualified. It appears as though they may have qualified for an indemnity. This is probably more of an RMA question. And so I would probably defer this to RMA with regard to filing currently for a claim on a crop in a prior year in 2021. So Richard or RMA team, if you want to take that question.
And 1 second, Steve, before we go, the Farm Service Agent, FSA is the Farm Service Agency. We're the folks who handle a lot of the direct payments and other things and loan programs with farmers. RMA is the Risk Management Agency. That's the agency that oversees crop insurance. And so there just was a chat of who's RMA. So Richard, as we go to you, RMA is the Risk Management Agency. They are the folks who address crop insurance.
Yeah, thank you. So I think if I understand the question correctly, if the question is, can you file a claim right now? Because it sounds like you might have been eligible, but you did not. I mean, I think there are others from RMA on the call, but I think at this point, it would depend upon when the claim, there was a cause of loss. But at this point, I don't think you could file a crop insurance claim and get in phase one, but I believe, that would be a phase two situation, because they could come in and under phase two present, what their losses were. If I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Richard. They're indicating it was a 2021 loss, and they only had roughly, appears as though, a 5% qualifying loss above their coverage. And so ultimately they didn't file a claim. They were wondering now whether they could file a claim to become eligible for ERP phase one, Emergency Relief Program phase one. You're saying there's time limits with regard to when that notice of loss had to be filed. So it's highly unlikely they could come in 2022 to go back and pick up the 2021 loss to now be eligible for ERP phase one. So you're correct. Phase two would be the probably only opportunity for them to pick up that loss at this time.
Can we make sure that that question was answered to the satisfaction of the questioner before we move on to the next one? Can that, whomever asked that question, can you go into the chat and let us know if that answers your question?
I believe it was Bree. Bree, let me know. In the meantime, a really easy question that has already been asked, and we can just reiterate
Okay.
really quickly.
I'd like to resolve this stuff so we don't leave things hanging. We're probably
Okay.
going to have a second webinar if you guys are agreeable because of the interest, but let's try and get as much of this resolved as possible.
Okay, Bree says we're good. She says that answers her question. Great. So next question. Again, this is one that's been asked, but I think just for clarity's sake is important to ask again. Is there any indication of when the phase two funds will open up for property owners who did not have insurance?
Yes, and Scott did kind of cover this earlier, that we are working diligently, constant conversations around how we're moving forward and moving forward quickly. The administration is definitely wanting to get this next phase out. But of course, unfortunately, we can't really go into much detail when that actually will be released. So forthcoming.
Perfect. The next question, what are the causes of loss? Can you speak more about this in detail? For example, drought, fire, smoke, are those losses eligible?
Yes, drought, fire, smoke, taint are eligible causes of loss. There is a laundry list, excessive moisture. We can provide that in the chat, or we can share that with the Congressman's office to be able to share with the participants on the call to provide the full laundry list, unless somebody from our team can put that into the chat, because I don't want to miss something if I try to just bring it off the top of my head.
Great. Next question. If a vineyard was sold in early 2022, for example, who would the previous owner, or excuse me, would the previous owner or the new owner be eligible for payments?
Would be the previous owner, because we are only covering losses for 2020 and 2021 due to events that occurred in, like I said, that window of January 1, 2020 through December 31 of 2021. So the events have to occur during that time frame. We probably would need more. You said that the vineyard changed hands or was sold at what time?
In early 2022.
Early 2022. We probably need to know the specific details, because I don't know exactly the crop year for grapes and whether or not a 2021 loss, 2021 event, an event occurring in between January 1 of 2021 through December 31 of 2021 would have had an impact on the 2022 crop. And so I think we need probably some more detail around that specific scenario before we can accurately answer the question.
Okay, so if they want to provide more detail, I'm happy to ask it again. So the next question while we wait for that is, what is the best way to monitor for updates and instructions for farmers who apply in phase two?
I would say farmers.gov. That is one of the biggest websites that we have within USDA that keeps updates, whether they frequently ask questions, whether they're fact sheets, press releases. They're all published on our farmers.gov website. And so they can regularly go into that website and get regular updates associated to any new features of the program, whether it's the non-insured disaster assistance program rollout, or whether it's the phase 2 rollout that's up and coming, or some of the other emergency relief that Scott referenced early in the discussion.
And I just dropped the fact sheet on the program, which has a lot of the details that we're referencing into the chat. So people can pull that. That's just a really good overview, but farmers.gov is, if things change and move, that's a good place to go.
All right. Next question. This person says, our vineyard is owned by a California limited partnership, but the ultimate beneficiary of the LP is a non-US individual. Does that disqualify us?
Restate that question, and I want to catch up so I can read it myself as we're going through.
For sure. It says, our vineyard is owned by a California limited partnership, but the ultimate beneficiary of the LP is a non-US individual. Does that disqualify us?
Foreign persons are not eligible for ERP, for the emergency relief program. So it depends on who has an interest in share interest in the commodity. If the share interest is that non-US beneficiary, then we would say no. However, if the beneficiary is the LLC, which is a US company, then ultimately they could be. Again, those eligibility criteria will be evaluated when the application comes back to the county office, and they'll make those determinations when the application is returned.
Steve, is that the only way to make that determination? Do they have to apply and find out what the response is, or is there a way to run the traps on that before?
Well, if there's questions, we can run those traps in advance.
Okay.
Rather than
well, maybe
having
the person, maybe whomever asked that question can contact my office, contact Katie in my Washington office. We'll get all the particulars, and then we'll run the traps with USDA.
That'll work.
Thank you.
Great. I'll throw my email in the chat and you can email me. Next question. We have insurance and only received 50 cents on the dollar for our grapes due to smoke taint. Because we are a newer vineyard, our average tonnage did not allow us to file a claim. Are we still eligible for phase 1?
Since they didn't receive an indemnity under the policy, is kind of how I interpret the question. They would not be eligible for phase 1. Only if they received an indemnity would they be eligible. So for the additional quality loss that they have up for the smoke taint, most likely will be picked up under phase 2 of the program.
Okay. Next question, and just a reminder to everybody, there are a ton of questions and I want to get through as many as possible. So if you see one you would like to have asked, please like it and I will ask the most popular questions. So next question, I did not have crop insurance in 2020. I now have 70% crop insurance for 2021 and 2022. I had a wildfire smoke taint damage in 2020. Will I be eligible for relief?
In phase 2.
In phase 2.
Absolutely.
Great. Next question. I would like to make sure I understand share interest. Do you mean if an LLC has 6 partners, all need to be listed?
No, if the insurance policy holder is an LLC, and FSA has that LLC recorded on the Farm Service Agency side in our records, and that LLC has 100% interest, then ultimately they would not have to list each member of the LLC on the application because FSA already has that information on record based on the tax ID number for the LLC. When we're talking about persons that have a substantial beneficial interest, those are situations where it's a landlord-tenant scenario, for example, where the landowner may have an interest in the crop, but the tenant insures 100% of the interest of the crop as the insurance policy holder. Ultimately, those are the situations where we need those broken out to be able to identify other persons who may have an interest in the commodity that would not have shown up on the original insurance policy under the coverage that they had. Hopefully that is helpful.
All right, next question. We were uninsured and had to drop all our fruit in 2020. What steps do we need to do to get the ball rolling?
The first thing that I would recommend as they're waiting for phase 2, because to me, it sounds like they're only going to be eligible for assistance under phase 2. If they've not visited their local county office, I would suggest going ahead and making certain their farm records are accurate within the county office so that when phase 2 does roll around and we roll out that second piece of the program, that they've already got their farm records updated, they've got everything in order. So when that assistance is released, then they're readily access to the program.
All right, next question. If we had losses in both insured and uninsured blocks, do we wait for phase 2 for a claim on the uninsured block?
For the uninsured block, yes. For the insured block and they received an indemnity, they will be included under this phase 1. But anything that was uninsured will be picked up under phase 2.
All right, next question. This person says there is no smoke option as a claim option. Do we know if RMA pulled in fire and or other as causes of loss for smoke exposure on wine grapes?
Again, we would want to defer that to the risk management agency. And so, Richard.
Could you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah, no, for sure. It says there is no smoke option as a claim option on the application. Do we know if the RMA pulled in fire and or other as causes of loss for smoke exposure on wine grapes?
I don't know, Chris or Jeff, did you know that?
Yeah, I think that gets back to Steve had kind of alluded to it earlier. There's really the focus on the crop insurance claim data is what calendar year did the cause of loss occur. There was no restriction on the actual cause of loss reported on that policy. So if you received an indemnity, that's flowing through into the application, and then it's the producer that's then certifying to the fact that a qualifying event impacted their production.
Yeah,
And just to follow up,
Yeah,
just
I
to
was just
follow.
gonna add. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
go ahead,
Steve.
Jeff.
Okay, I was just gonna add that if you want on those applications, smoke taint, you could list wildfire as the cause of loss. It is one of the eligible causes, I believe, on the fact sheet, and that's how the crop insurance companies handled it, as wildfire, not smoke.
And I was just going to add one additional thing, because when the questioner asked the question about the application, I didn't know whether that was the FSA 520 didn't list cause of loss, because it's not going, the 520 application, the pre-filled application is not going to list a cause of loss. The producer certifies to the cause of loss as what was authorized under the statutory legislation. Just to try to pull full clarity around all pieces.
All right, next question. What if a property owner has not already established farm records at this point? Can they still do so now?
Most definitely. That's was some of the lead in of the prior question when they said, well, if I'm waiting for phase 2, what can I do now in preparation? And I said, visit your local county FSA office service center and have them start working on establishing those farm records for phase 2, so that when phase 2 does roll out, your farm records are already up to date.
And I believe that fact sheet that Scott shared lists out the specific resources necessary, and the congressman has a letter with all of that. So we can share that around for anyone who's unsure what they need to have. Okay, next question. Can you please repeat the calculation of how much we will ultimately get?
Well, actually, I can do high level because there's a lot of factors that are included with regard to, what the benefit will actually calculate out to. I think the simplest way to say it is we're going to take the coverage level that they elected. And then in that coverage level, I'm sure the fact sheet addresses this too, it provides a table which then applies an ERP factor to and bumps up the coverage level from whatever was elected by the the producer. So for example, if I had 65-100 coverage under the ERP, we're going to bump that up to, I think it's 70. Does anybody have that right off the top of the head for 65-100 coverage level? 65 goes to 7250. Is that correct?
Steve, are you
Yeah, I'm asking the question, Kim.
okay, this is
So
on
my
the-
example is 65% coverage level. What
Right.
what is our ERP factor for 65-100 coverage level?
under
87.5, 87.5.
87.5. Thank you.
Yes.
So basically, we're going to recalculate the guarantee at 87.5% rather than the 65%. So you had crop insurance coverage at 65% based on the ERP factor, and those factors are dependent upon the level of coverage that's elected by the producer under the original insurance policy. We're going to recalculate the guarantee then at 87.5% and then take into consideration the indemnity that the producer received, in addition to the premium and service fees or the deductible that was applied to determine what the ERP payment is going to be. So that's a very simplistic calculation to get to the end product. And I do know we've worked with Farm Bureau in identifying the calculation. So we can also share that link with regard to what that calculation is so that people can see that much clearer.
Okay. Next question. This person says, will smoke taint testing be required for each varietal or block to qualify for phase 2 non-insured losses?
It's probably a little bit premature to talk in detail with regard to what phase 2 is going to take into consideration. All I can share with you at this point in time is the fact that we're going to try to keep this as a simplified process moving forward. But I can't go into detail with regard to any of whether or not the testing, lab testing is going to be required or not. I don't anticipate that it will, because we are trying to keep this simple. But at this point in time, it's too premature to really to go into that level of detail.
All right. Next question. On the FSA form 520, I'm not clear how to fill out Part D NAP crop information. It seems to duplicate Part C, which was already filled out when I received the form.
And again, the form was designed to cover both crop insurance and NAP, non-insured crop disaster assistance program crops. And so if you have NAP crops, you already have NAP coverage for those crops, you will receive a subsequent pre-filled application for NAP in the very near future. And so don't worry about the NAP section. The only section that we're concerned about right now is that's pre-filled, which is the crop insurance portion of phase 1.
Okay. Next question, is the crop insurance requirement for 60% level or higher for the next 2 years for the crop that qualified for ERP, or will the grower be required to obtain insurance on all of their crops? Example, Cabernet had a loss and Merlot did not. Will they only be required to buy 60% or higher on the Cabernet?
If crop insurance allows you to insure them uniquely different, it really is only for the crop in which you're receiving the assistance.
All right. Another question, kind of a reiteration again, but probably good for the sake of clarity. If you got some or partial coverage from your insurance after the disaster, are you still eligible to apply for disaster assistance for the rest of the loss?
Yes. Phase 2 will pick up all gaps that you received loss on, whether that's quality, whether it's some of the units that you did not have insured or you had insured at a lower level, so you didn't carry the same level of coverage. If you did not and are not qualifying under this first round of phase 1, it will be picked up under phase 2.
All right. Next question, is there a time limit to return your applications to apply in phase 1?
60 days. So I think we have the date as July the 22nd I believe, is the date that we've identified. I think it's a Friday. I'd have to look at a calendar to confirm that, but 60 days. They have 60 days to return the pre-filled application.
To the
A
FSA
July
office.
date is the end date,
July 22nd, I believe, sir,
is the end date.
is the end date. That is correct.
Okay.
For phase one.
and it's included, Steve, I think that date was also included, or perhaps may have been included on the cover letter. I'm just pulling the cover letter.
Perfect. Thanks, Kim.
All right. Okay, so a follow-up question. Previously, we were talking about different records that people have on file or should have on file with their local FSA office. Someone's wondering, are those different from the paperwork that you all are sending to them to apply? Or is that included in the form that you sent everyone?
No, the only thing that we sent to producers was the pre-filled FSA 520 ERP application. Other documents, if you've participated in FSA programs in the past, whether it might have been for CFAP, the coronavirus food assistance programs that we administered, if you've already participated in those programs, we probably already have your information on file, and it will not require you to establish that farm record. It's just that if you've never participated with FSA, the Farm Service Agency, in the past, or you're picked up new land that you haven't recorded to FSA or Farm Service Agency in the past, that is the only time that you will have to establish those farm records. And we would recommend that you go in early to work with the county office to get those farm records established. But if you've participated in the past, most likely those eligibility records and those farm records are already on file. And the only thing that you would need to submit is the 520, but the 520 that they received in the mail does not include those farm records documents to help establish those records.
All right. Next question, if there is an error on the pre-filled application, such as a missing block, what should a grower do?
Well, it depends, and I know the cover letter goes into this detail. If it's a concern about a data entry in blocks 7 through 10 and 11, then they should reach out to their insurance agent. If there are other questions about the form, then they could reach out to their county FSA office. So for example, if for some reason there's data missing, and I can't imagine why there'd be data missing on a pre-filled application, everything should be on the application if they received it. But if it's a question about any of the data, 7 through 10 and items 7 through 10 and 12, then they should reach out to their insurance agent, and they can help them decipher what that data is, whether it was incorrect or if they have questions about it. But if it's something other than those items, and again, it's really listed in the letter that's written and sent by the administrators of both agencies, it kind of summarizes who to contact with regard to those questions.
Steve, I'll drop it in the chat.
Thank you, Kim.
All right, next question, some clarifying ones. This person says, just to clarify, I will leave item number 13 blank if there's no other party involved or party that would benefit on this commodity.
That is correct.
Okay. Regarding the ERP payment on the pre-filled application, will that amount be reduced by the amount of crop insurance proceeds we have already received?
No, the amount that is calculated on the form will be reduced, but it will be reduced as a result of a 75% payment factor. One of the things that we have to make certain of is that we stay within the $10 billion that were authorized under the program. And so based on estimates that we have, ultimately, we have factored ERP, emergency relief payments, by 75% to make certain that we stay, at least for crop insurance, to stay within the funding level allotted. If for some reason we find out that we do not use all the $10 billion, then we will come back after phase 2 and we can increase that payment factor to increase the amount of money that a producer may receive up to the amount that's on the pre-filled application.
Okay, next question. Where do we send our completed applications form back to? The cover letter did not specify.
I would identify where their local county FSA Farm Service Agency office is, and they can either mail it back to them or they can drop it off at the local service center.
Yeah, and it should be printed, I think, in item 5 of that form. The first parts of our form usually includes the county office or the local service center that would have, you know, or in position to service that particular producer. So they look at item 5 on their form, it should list an address and I think phone number as well.
All right, and I see a follow-up question that where people aren't sure which FSA office is their local office, and I'll just go ahead and say, if you're not sure, you can email me, and I'll put my email in the chat again, and I will help you find your local FSA office.
And again, check that item 5 on the form, on the 520, because that should have a county office listed.
All right, next question. They said, sorry to ask this question again, but our vineyard is leased by a vineyard management company. The agreement is based on grape sales. Grapes were smoke tainted. Which entity should file for relief?
First of all, I think we need to identify who's the policy holder, who's the insurance policy holder under. So that would be my first question, probably to to the person who's asking the question, is who's the person that has the insurance, who's the policy holder of the insurance. That is going to come over. That is actually who's going to be pre-filled in that application when it comes to them and their address based on that insurance policy holder. Ultimately, that's going to be what's sent to the producer. The producer is going to indicate that, yes, that policy holder has 100% interest in the commodity or it doesn't. And then ultimately, they're going to have to either indicate someone else who has the interest. But I think the simple answer is, and let's just keep it simple because I don't want to make it too difficult. How we've designed the program is the person who has an interest in the commodity typically has to be the person that's on the insurance policy. The insurance policy holder is the one that we're getting the data from RMA that is then being shared with FSA to complete the pre-filled applications. Those pre-filled applications are going to the policy holder, and the policy holder should be the one that has an interest in the crop to then submit the ERP application to FSA.
Does that answer the questioner's concern? Because both of them have an interest in the crop, whomever is least, who's ever purchased the crop or whoever's farming for the crop and the person who owns the crop.
And that could be a substantial benefit. Sir, you're absolutely correct. It could be someone that has a substantial beneficial interest. If RMA's rules allow this, it's kind of getting into a gray area that I'm not as familiar with because it kind of tiptoes over into the RMA side. But that may be something that we would might need to have RMA to kind of weigh in once we know whether that answered the question or didn't answer the question.
The person says that it did answer their question, so they're good
Perfect.
to go. Let's see, back to the top. So this person says, phase 1 requires purchasing crop insurance for 2 or more years if receiving an ERP payment. If the owner of the property during 2020 or 2021 has sold their property in 2022, so they owned it during 2020 and 2021, sold it during 2022, they obviously couldn't have crop insurance any longer. Would they still be eligible?
Yes, they still would be eligible for ERP. If for some reason a producer, and we've had this in past disaster programs, so if I received a disaster payment for, let's say, my spinach, and there isn't NAP coverage out there for spinach, don't know that it's out there for crop insurance or not, but might be. But for some reason, I don't grow spinach in that following year. Again, it's tied to the crop in which assistance is received. So you're only required to get it for the crop in which assistance is being paid. In this instance, as the example identified, they own the vineyard in 20 and 21. They sold it, let's say, January 1 of 2022. They're not going to be required to obtain insurance coverage because they really can't, because they no longer own the vineyard. So they would no longer be required to meet linkage because they don't have a crop to cover. Now, if they purchased other land, then yes, they still would have to purchase and meet the linkage requirement if they still maintained and grew a crop in which they received assistance under. Does that make sense? So selling a farm, getting out of farming does not still require you to meet linkage. However, if you sell the farm, but then buy another farm and still are growing the crop, then technically you would still have to meet linkage. It's not tied directly to the acres. It's tied to the crop that you're growing.
All right, we have just a couple more minutes and I want to make sure I'm using all the time as, well as possible. So if you look through like the questions, that we want to fit in here at the end. This next question says, if a property owner receives a pre-filled application for wine grape losses, do they need to fill out any additional forms to receive the upper limit, for specialty crops, the 900,000 that you talked about? Will that be already included in their pre-filled application, or do they need something else to qualify?
It's a great question. They will have to submit a separate form. It's an FSA 510. The 510 is not being included in the package of the pre-filled application. So they will have to get an FSA 510, take it to the certified public accountant. They will identify that over 75% of their income is to farming and submit that application to the county office. Now, the 510 does not have to be submitted at the same time as the 520. So they could go ahead and submit their 520 to the application, knowing that they're only going to have a $125,000 payment limitation up front. But then once they complete the 510 for the adjusted gross income and the 75% test, when that's submitted to the county office will go in and issue an additional payment to recognize the higher payment limitation of $900,000 at that time. So it doesn't have to be submitted simultaneously. It's not included in the application. It doesn't have to be submitted simultaneously, but it is a separate form that they will have to complete before they're eligible for the $900,000 payment limitation.
All right, and to get the 510, could they get that at their farm service agency office, or is that online somewhere?
That is also online. Farmers.gov would have access to those forms as well, or they can pick one up from their local FSA office.
All right, I think this next one will probably be our last question. This person says, we are still in the process of providing requested documentation for our initial crop loss claim. Do we have to complete this process before we can apply for phase 1?
Yes, if they're still in the claim process, and again, this is really designed for those 2020 and 2021 crops. So if this is a 2022 crop that suffered a loss as a result of an event that occurred after January 1 of 2021, then that will not be included under ERP. But if for some reason they're still filing their documentation, loss claim documentation for a 2020 or 2021 crop, and I don't want to go into details of why they would still be doing that, but there could be examples of that. They need to have that documentation filed before they will be eligible and receive an indemnity, a claim indemnity, before they will be eligible for ERP phase 1. We will be running a later payment run for those records that we are currently missing. And so it is something that could be picked up under phase 1 later on this summer, once we run another data run with regard to new claims filed and new indemnities paid for 2020 or 2021 crops.
All right, I think we're about out of time, Mike. There's still a lot of questions, but that's all the time we have.
Let me ask Steve, are you willing to do this again?
Most certainly. I mean, we want to be as informative. We want to be as helpful.
Yeah, that's all I needed to hear. But all right. The hour went pretty quick. So next time we won't have to do any introductions. We'll just jump right into the questions. So folks who haven't had their questions answered, Katie can look over those questions and maybe we can get some answers back to them. But let's get another meeting scheduled as soon as we can so we can go over this. Thank you very much for for doing this. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you back on the Zoom in the very near future. Katie, great job. And to all the folks who participated in the webinar, again, I'm sorry you're having to go through all of this, but we'll get you through it. So thanks very much, and everybody be safe.
Thank you all.